Sometimes developers try to hide secrets about video games, but did you know gaming is on them like a hound to a mouse, like a cat to a mouse, like an eagle to a mouse. They will sniff it out, they will grab it, and they'll put it in a concise and easy to watch video format that we can all enjoy. Thank you, Did You Know Gaming.
Did you know? Sword and Shield weren't originally going to have Pokemon roaming around in the wild. The gallery was going to have a wild area, sure, but it was just going to be a big empty route.
Is that Ron? Oh my god, that's Ron. That's Ron's voice. That's True Green 7 here. I love Ron. Ron's fantastic. Ron's so talented.
For the first few years of development, it was all random encounters in tall grass. But less than a year before—
I need to debuffer for a second there. They said that they wouldn't have Pokemon in the overworld in the wild area. So you just walk around this massive, sprawling piece of land that barely loaded, and there would just be nothing in the overworld. There would just be wild encounters. I can't imagine that that's a very fun and enjoyable experience.
Before the game's released, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee hit store shelves, and Game Freak saw how much fans loved the overworld Pokemon. According to Sword and Shield's director, Shigeru Omori, they worked extra hard to implement the feature before launch, and had to completely rebalance Galar to get it to work.
Oh my god, so they had to do this feature in the last, year of development? Dude, developing games is so hard. No wonder it was so laggy and glitchy. No wonder they struggled so much in the overworld. I mean, I'm glad that they did it because it made it so much more lively and enjoyable.
Finally.
How would it even look like if there was no Pokemon in the overworld? They would have got donked on even more. People already say that Sword and Shield was one of the worst Pokemon games of all time, which I think is a really strange thing to say because I feel like most Pokemon games are on like the same balancing, the same footing. As long as it's a playable video game with Pokemon in it, it's like a 7 out of 10. You know, it's fine, it's enjoyable, I like it, I can make lots of funny videos with it. I'm a big fan of the series, but none of them are exceptionally better or exceptionally worse than others. As long as it's a playable video game that doesn't crash on entry, then you know you're doing pretty well and it'll sell millions and millions of copies. But if they didn't have the Pokemon in the overworld in Sword and Shield, people would hate it even more than they do now. That's one of the few redeeming features that they actually had in this video game.
Used a mix of both roaming Pokemon and random encounters. According to Omori, they used both to satisfy fans of the old games as well as newer fans who liked Let's Go. But in a much more practical sense, they went with the dual system approach due to technical challenges. Game Freak didn't know how many Pokemon they could make appear in the overworld all at once, so hiding some in the grass was a development shortcut to squeeze them in before the release deadline. Back in 2016,
sure, I mean, sometimes you have to make some sacrifices like that. It makes sense. And you can't have them all in the overworld, because if you did, it would be annoying. Let's be honest. If you try to run through the grass, cycle through the grass, and they're all just popping up at the same time, there's like 20 of them, how are you going to get through the grass? You put repel on, that's how you do it. But it would probably still be kind of annoying because there'd be so many in a little period of grass, and it wouldn't even look realistic. It's like going into a field and seeing 17 foxes just there. As soon as you're trying to walk through the field, there's just 17 foxes, 19 pigeons, 16 birds all over the place.
The Pokemon team knew that the next Nintendo console was going to be a hybrid system codenamed NX, but internally they had doubts about the hardware's future. Pokemon Company CEO Tsunekazu Ishihara said, "I told Nintendo that Switch wouldn't be a success before it went on sale."
What? Oh my god! Whoa, the most wrong anyone has ever been. In the history of people being wrong, this is the most wrong. This is the biggest mistake, the biggest, fattest L that anyone has ever taken. Wow, the Switch wouldn't be successful? Coming off the Wii U, I can understand why they might think that, but man, in hindsight, that's a crazy statement.
Because I thought in the age of the smartphone, no one would carry around a game console. It wasn't love at first sight for series producer.
I kind of hate that they had that presumption that no one would want to play video games on a handheld console anymore because we have these motherfuckers. Are you serious? This thing sucks for playing video games. This is great for going online and yelling at game developers on twitter.com about how the trees look ugly, but this is terrible for actually playing video games. It's like he doesn't understand how people even enjoy playing games in the first place. Like, sure, there's a lot of people that play mobile games. They're free to play. They're pretty easy to access and they have a lot of players, but there's something that you'll never be able to take away from the tactile interface of a console that you can hold in your hands, or just a controller that you can hold in your hands. There's so much more that you could do with a Nintendo Switch in terms of gameplay than you can do with a phone because of the hardware limitations of a phone and because it has to be touchscreen. And touchscreen controls, they've just never appealed to me. Never appealed to me at all, and I think there's a lot of people that share the same opinion with me.
Junichi Masuda either. A few weeks before Sword and Shield's hit store shelves, he said instead of the Switch, Game Freak would have preferred developing for a new DS model. But Ishihara and Masuda eventually realized they were wrong and went all in, determined—
I'm glad that they realized they were wrong. I can also totally understand why they would have wanted to develop for another DS model, because when you're comfortable with something, why change? And Pokemon is a very, very big franchise. I'm sure you've heard of it before. If you're already developing a game and there's a lot of pressure on you to make the games in a timely manner, developing for a new console is going to complicate things, and you don't really want to push yourself all that far. It's more of an idea of, do you want to step outside of your comfort zone and try something new, risky, maybe a little bit scary, or do you want to stick to something that you know, the devil that you know, rather than whatever the Nintendo Switch could be off in the distance? Because you have to remember, this is before the Switch was released and everyone was like, wow, this is great.
Determined to take advantage of the Switch's horsepower and make Gen 8 the best Pokemon games yet. Development for Sword and Shield actually started before Sun and Moon were even finished, while Masuda and Omori were on a promotional tour in the United Kingdom. The UK's strength seemed to be a good fit for what they hoped would become the series' strongest entries. According to Omori, in terms of sort of historical industry development, the Industrial Revolution, and also in terms of the modern day, things like sports, the UK is historically quite strong in those aspects as well. So when thinking of the strongest Pokemon games, the UK came to mind as a really suitable area to base it on.
POV, someone said something nice about the UK. This never happens. And I also agree. I think it's really strong historically. I think that they had a really good idea. And honestly, one of my favorite things about Sword and Shield is the way that they represented the historical significance of different parts of Galar and how they displayed different parts of British culture in Sword and Shield. For someone who is British, I think that the region is one of the strongest that they've ever done, but I have a personal bias because I live here, obviously. It's gonna be a little bit biased in that. But I loved Galar. From people that live in different countries, it might just be like a whack region that is like all straight lines. But for a person who lives here, just seeing the little details, the teacups and the clothes that they wear, the slang that they use, how it all seems to fit in really nicely. I was really impressed with how they managed to represent Galar. I'm a big fan of it.
Omori traveled around the UK sketching early concepts, like this drawing he made for Galar Pokemon Centers. He jotted down some notes in Japanese, so for your convenience, we've translated all the concept art in this video into English. In older games, NPCs just kinda stood around in Pokemon Centers for no discernible reason. So for Galar, he wanted Pokemon Centers to look like typical UK pubs, which gave people a believable reason for being there all day. Well, that's what Omori said, but
Oh my god, he wanted to make Pokemon Centers a pub? Could you imagine? That would be so good! They should have done that! You walk into the pub and you got the local Brexit geese over there sitting with his pint of Foster's. He's got his pint of Carlin in the set. He's got his pint of Carlin in the corner. He's watching the footy on the television up there. Oh, what's up, mate? You coming in? You need to heal your Pokemon? Ah, yeah. Nurse is over there, mate. Yeah. You'd see the tap. You'd see what they got on draft. You could down a Guinness before you go back on your adventure. It would actually look like this. So this is what a Pokemon Center would have looked like if it was actually based around being a pub. That's the local gym leader. Oh, Harry's appeared. Look at what they took from us. This could have been Pokemon Centers. The culture that was ripped from our hands. This is what we could have been given. If they did this, Sword and Shield would be perfectly reviewed. It would be the greatest Pokemon game of all time. I'm so sad they didn't do that.
Pokemon Centers in the final game didn't end up looking nearly as pub-like as his concept art. Omori also visited Windermere, where he was inspired by the town's atmosphere, countless sheep, and walls of stacked dry stone. He
was impressed by the countless sheep.
Drew this sketch that ultimately became Postwick, so we suppose you could say Sword and Shield's hometown was based on Windermere. This other sketch Omori made in the Lake District ended up as Route 2, and while he was there, he heard a legend that catching cotton balls floating in the air could bring good fortune, which was used to create Gossifleur. Later, he took a train through the English countryside and made this art of the lakes and towns he saw in the distance.
Oh, it's
which
so
served
pretty.
as inspiration for the wild area.
I wish it had the same prettiness in the game because there's so much potential here.
As well as the train riding scene at the start of the game. Omori and Masuda later brought on James Turner, an Englishman who happened
James Turner designed Vanillix, by the way.
to be the only non-Japanese member of the Pokemon design team. James got his start in spin-off games like Pokemon Coliseum and Gale of Darkness, then moved up to working on the mainline series.
Oh, he also designed Shadow Lugia too.
In Gen 5. He's actually the only person that worked on the Ore region games and the core series. Galler's based on his homeland, so they promoted him all the way to art director.
Oh my god, imagine walking into work one day and it's like, okay, you're British, you are the art director now.
James drafted much more detailed concept art of patchwork farmland, sheep, and English-style homes, which
so
the team
pretty.
used to build the Galar region. He also made this artwork of a stadium TV broadcast, and with that, much
so
of the
sick.
game's UI was based on the typical
I love
flat
James, he's
design you
great.
tend to see on sports channels. According to James, only 2 or 3 out of every 10 Pokemon Game Freak drew made it into Pokemon Sword and Shield. In other words, about 300 Pokemon ended up in the trash.
Oh man, I would love to see the designs for that though. Wouldn't that be sick to know all the potentials that we could have had? They'll never show us, obviously. They'll keep the ideas for the future, or they'll just scrap them so people don't steal it, but it would have been nice to
He
know.
said that so many designs have already been done before, that it's getting more and more difficult to come up with new ideas. As James explained it, it's like trying to park in a really crowded car park or something. You're going this way, there's a car there. You're going that way, there's a car. You're trying to find some unique space. This color scheme has been used before, this animal has been used before. You're trying to find something unique. That's important.
You also have to connect it to the region in some kind of way. Not all Pokemon are connected to their region, but you have to connect it to the region. They have to be believable that they could like live in this world as well. They have to have a name that makes sense. You have to have a cool, unique design that has never been used before, because if you get caught making an animal that looks like someone else's animal that someone else has drew at some point in the past ever, like a deviant art image that's been up since 2011 that just coincidentally looks like your guy, then you are going to get slated. They're going to go on Twitter and say, they're running out of ideas. Look at them stealing from deviant artists from 2011. How dare they, those pieces of shit.
That might have been why Sword and Shield, arguably more than any previous generation, had so many Pokemon based on the region itself. In a Japanese interview we translated, Omori said that more so than older games, for Gen 8, they did thorough research on the region's real-life flora, fauna, and culture. An example he gave was how Japanese leeks are small, but in the UK they're big and chunky, which is how
Oh my god,
Sirfetch'd was
it's so
born.
big.
He also said they saw a steam engine, then drew up Galarian Weezing. Gigantamax and Dynamax forms were inspired by UK legends about giants, which persist to this day. Likewise,
I love it.
Stonjourner, based on megalith structures like England's Stonehenge, and Gigantamax Duraludon is the UK's tallest skyscraper, the Shard. Corviknight draws from the Black Knight literary trope, and Phalanx form a group of soldiers in phalanx formation.
I actually think that it's interesting that they said that Phalanx is based on the like red coat troopers from like the 1800s, when it seems to me that it makes more sense that Phalanx would be based off of actual Greek soldiers in phalanx formation, because their arms are like shields. And the phalanx was originally, I think, a Greek invention from ancient Greece, like thousands of years ago. But I mean, I guess it can be both, right?
The Pokedex calls Boltund and Thievul natural enemies, a nod to traditional British fox hunting. And Carcoal is based on a minecart because the Industrial Revolution and coal mining began in Great Britain.
Why didn't they add a chimney sweep Pokemon for all the 5-year-olds that they forced to chimney sweep? Why didn't they have a whooping cough Pokemon? Oh, I guess they do. It's
The
Wheezing.
less obvious one is Runerigus, who's clearly based on runestones, which are the rocks that Vikings used as gravestones. The stories of dead Vikings are written all over runestones, and sometimes the image of an animal too. This is why the
That's
Pokedex
cool.
says to never touch Runerigus, or you'll be shown the horrific memories behind the pictures carved into it. It also explains why Runerigus is ground and ghost type. It's a gravestone after all. Some fans think Gigantamax Meowth is based on the Long Cat internet meme, but Game Freak doesn't have a history of making meme Pokemon. Actually, it appears to be a more British-specific reference. During Sword and Shield's development, Omori said he'd been watching a lot of Monty Python.
What a cultured individual. Finally, some true culture in these video games.
And the Monty Python show, as well as one of the movies, both
Oh my
contain
God.
a classic animation where a giant cat with outstretched arms terrorizes a city.
It just ate a
Likewise,
building.
Cantonian Mouth was based on Japanese culture. According to series creator Satoshi Tajiri, it's a representation of the Japanese proverb, a coin to a cat. That's what Japanese people say when someone's acting like a cat with a coin stuck on his head, unable to appreciate the value it holds because they're simple-minded.
Hey, whoa, don't say that. Listen, my cat's not simple-minded. My cat knows exactly when to get up. He knows when it's breakfast time. He knows when he should come and scratch my face so that I'll come and give him brek. He knows when it's time for treats, because he'll sit next to his treat box and he'll meow for treats. He knows how to get into the treat box because I have a little hole in it and I put treats in the box, and he'll paw around until the treats fall out of the hole. And he's a smart guy.
Sword and Shield's big bad legendary Eternatus appears to be based on the xenomorph queen from the Alien films. That's really more of a theory of ours than a
Interesting.
hard fact, but the case is pretty strong with lots of history behind it. We'll probably never get a solid confirmation from Game Freak, and that's kind of our fault in a way. We've covered a lot of lost Pokemon history, but this time, it sorta got lost because of us. Let me explain.
What? What did you do, Did You Know Gaming? What have you done?
Over the years, James Turner made thousands of tweets, many of them when he only had a few hundred followers. Back in 2019, we went through every tweet he ever made for research purposes to get some behind-the-scenes info on the Pokemon design process.
Oh no, this is scaring me. This is like when people go back to a content creator's tweets and he said, oh look, he said a slur in 2009. Guys! Look at this! This is big news!
For example, he said Guzzlord is partially based on Agrajag from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and Vanillux was inspired by the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from
What, really?
More importantly, though, he said he was a big fan of H.R. Giger, the artist most famous for designing the alien Xenomorph, and that he made Naganadel to look, quote, sleek and alien, and that its original design had legs, just like a Xenomorph.
Oh my god, he's just tweeting this stuff on the timeline. This is such cool information.
Sounds a lot like Giger's alien, doesn't it? We started quoting James's old tweets, then literally the next day he deleted 96 tweets from his account, including everything we just copied. Our quotations got
Damn, you know he got slammed in the emails. He woke up and looked at his work inbox for the day, and there was a very strongly, sternly worded email from Nintendo PR and lawyers that said, "Sir, can you please delete every single tweet, or we will destroy you."
A lot more attention than his original tweets from years earlier. And it seems someone at Game Freak didn't want James sharing this kind of detail, so he purged his account of all behind-the-scenes information.
That's sad.
It's literally an alien, according to the Pokedex. It's also poison dragon type, exactly what a Xenomorph would be if it was a Pokemon.
Well, I mean, would it be dragon though? I mean, maybe poison dark. I think it would just be poison in general.
It's a pretty strong resemblance as well. Just look at him. James also draws Xenomorph fan art and posts it online. But like we said, because of the whole tweet purge thing, we don't expect to get solid confirmation from
I love his art style. The softness of the corners, the slight cartooniness. It's just really... I love the thick lines too. It's just
James
really good.
Anyone else at Game Freak. Especially after he denied our request for an interview because of corporate rules. But the alien homages actually go all the way back to...
Yeah, if he did an interview without their permission, he would be guillotined when he entered the office. I don't think he works for the Pokemon Company anymore. I think he does his own indie game stuff now. But if you say anything that the Pokemon Company doesn't want you saying, boom, executed, poison in your cereal.
Gen 2, long before James became art director. Gligar bears a strong resemblance to a baby Xenomorph, also known as a facehugger. Gligar's
I hate those things.
Looked even more like a facehugger. And Gligar's Japanese name, Guraiga, is literally just H.R. Giger's name with an L slapped in. Giger designed the facehugger, Xenomorph, and the Queen, so it all comes full circle. Pokemon designs have been inspired by the Alien franchise for decades, and Eternatus is the ultimate manifestation of that inspiration.
Perfect organism.
What is he covered in?
Speaking of the perfect organism, here's what Eternatus looked like in Sword and Shield's beta build.
What? That's so goofy. Hold on, go back to the Goofa. Look at that. Look at how goofy he is.
That's so silly. Sword and Shield's beta build.
Oh, that's awesome.
Interesting James Turner tweets highlighted the theme of the Obstagoon.
Speaking of Sword and Shield, actually, I did see this piece of concept art pretty recently. This is not about Sword and Shield. This is Scarlet and Violet, and this was a piece of concept art that was created for Scarlet and Violet as an idea of what they wanted the game to look like. This is tweeted by Joe. It is a concept art image. This is not what the game actually looked like at any point. So this is like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if it looked like this? And man, it would have been cool if it looked like this. You got a big fat Snorlax over here that looks pretty sick. You got an unidentified Pokemon on the left here. You have the character looking good. You have so much shrubbery and so much stuff going on here. This is kind of what Tears of the Kingdom looks like right now. Maybe a little bit more detailed than Tears of the Kingdom, but it is not what Scarlet and Violet looks like, unfortunately.
Family. Zigzagoon is a zigzag, Linoon's a straight line, and Obstagoon's an obstacle. He was the designer who made all their Galarian forms. When Obstagoon was first revealed, KISS band member Gene Simmons thanked Game Freak for making a Pokemon based on his likeness. He said he was flattered, as his kids have been playing Pokemon for decades. Game Freak never accepted his thanks or acknowledged the inspiration, maybe for the same reason all of those tweets got deleted. But the similarities are definitely striking.
I guess the best way to go about handling a multi-billion-dollar business is to never say anything. If you get inspired by something, just never say anything. Never acknowledge anything. Never say thank you. you. Never ask permission either. They never asked permission to put his likeness in it. But I guess it would be cool to have your likeness just appear in a Pokemon game one day, wouldn't it?
And the last Gen 8 design we're going to cover is Galarian Slowking, who, similar to Eternatus, was a continuation of the franchise's earliest designs. In the old magazine we translated from Japan, art director Ken Sugimori says that he likes to add a new Pokemon who's dribbling something in every generation, like Gloom dribbling his saliva in Gen 1, or Cubchoo with his snot in Gen 5. In that same historical vein, Slowking is the dribbler of Galar.
Oh, by dribbler, I thought they meant like dribbling a ball, like Cinderace dribbling a ball. I didn't know they meant dribbling from their nose and or holes in ears.
Game Freak doubled their team size from about 100 developers working on Sun and Moon to 200 for Sword and Shield. They were working on other games as well, as part of a company initiative called the Gear Project. We talked about the Gear Project more in depth in our Pokemon Z video, but just to sum.
Yeah, the Gear Project is when Game Freak is like, listen guys, we don't want to just do Pokemon. We need to think of something else. Come on, we need some other game. Please, someone think of a good idea. We can't just make Pokemon anymore. We need to do something else. And whenever they release a game, it kind of flops a little bit, which is a little sad, but it is what it is. If you want your games to do well, make a good game, I guess.
The Gear Project was the studio's plan to make another hit series that would be just as successful as Pokemon. According to one of Game Freak's directors, Masayuki Onoe, there are two different production teams here, simply named Production Team 1 and Production Team 2. Team 1 is fully dedicated to the Gear Project, while Team 2 is for the Pokemon operation. What that means is that Game Freak as a company is prioritizing Gear Project, which is Production Team number 1, more than Pokemon in general. With the Gear Project, we're targeting PS4, Xbox One, and PC.
Now, this was an article that was made back when PS4, Xbox One, and PC were actually used. Well, okay, PC is still used, actually, but this is an old article, but it's kind of sad that they're not prioritizing, the big moneymaker, and it kind of shows itself in the quality of the games. And we could say all day that they need more time to develop games, which they do. They definitely need more time to develop games, but I just feel like there's maybe not enough motivation or just not enough will within them to truly make something spectacular like they maybe could have with this series.
One of these games was an RPG called Little Town Hero, which released a month before Sword and Shield, but got pretty low review scores and didn't sell well.
I remember when Little Town Hero was announced, all the Pokemon YouTubers were like, oh, Pog, let's go. Game Freak making another game. Let's freaking get it. And it came out, nobody bought it. People made maybe one video on this game, never talked about it again.
Another game they briefly started but never finished was Project Tezu, a sort of stylized retro mech side-scroller.
Oh, the animation was done by James Turner as well. Oh, okay. Huh. What is going on? A mech?
James Turner tweeted out this gameplay footage, but just like all those other tweets, the footage later got deleted. Fortunately, we've already downloaded it. Some fans said Game Freak shouldn't have been making other games and instead focus 100% on just Pokemon. Many were disappointed with Sword and Shield's animations, that less than half the series Pokemon made it into Sword and Shield.
I think they could find developers really passionate about making a fantastic Pokemon game if they wanted to.
And the supposedly Nintendo 64 tree textures. A vocal minority promised to boycott, and that wasn't exclusive to the West. Japanese fans were mad too. One story that sticks.
I love it when people threaten to boycott a game because it's super big on Twitter. It's like, guys, we need to not buy this. We need to vote with our wallets. We need to show the game developers that we're not going to stand for this lack of quality anymore. We're going to boycott this game. And then they are going to be sorry when they make no money and they have to fire all their workers. Which, to be honest, I'm all for boycotts. Don't buy something that you don't like. Obviously, you shouldn't spend money on things that you don't like. And voting with your wallet is the best way to do it. But it didn't work. It never works. The Pokemon games always sell a gorillion copies. It doesn't work. It would be interesting to see what it would change if it did work. So, hey, maybe there's still an opportunity for that in the future, but it didn't work this time.
Is when a Japanese fan said Bayleaf was their favorite Pokemon and she couldn't wait to see it in Galar, Junichi Masuda retweeted her saying thank you. Thing was, Bayleaf wasn't actually in Sword and Shield. It was one of the Pokemon who didn't make the cut. Masuda got swamped with hundreds of replies calling him heartless, a scammer, and a psychopath.
What? Psychopath? No, I'm sorry, that's funny. Knowing that Bayleaf isn't in Sword and Shield and retweeting a fan is like, I love Bayleaf, I can't wait to use it. Yeah, like, it's kind of mean, but this is funny as well.
Later said those kinds of interactions with fans got him pretty bummed. But after all the Twitter criticism and boycotts, Masuda felt a lot better when Sword and Shield ended up selling.
He was wiping his eyes with dollar bills.
As previous generations. As of this video's publication, they're still the best-selling Pokemon games for the Switch. Did you also know that there's a lost Pokemon game that fans are trying to restore?
Yes, I have actually watched that video as well, but that was absolutely fantastic. We learned a lot of new stuff today, and I always love talking about it. I think it's fantastic. You know what else is great? And you should be subscribed to Did You Know Gaming, because they do stuff that you don't know all the time. You think you know gaming? Well, you didn't. Not until you subscribe to Did You Know Gaming, because they're amazing. You should do it right now, literally right now. Look at all these good videos that you could watch. You can watch all of these literally currently, and there's more Pokemon fact videos that I'm not going to react to because I want you to go and watch them on Did You Know Gaming right now.